This is a special day, special indeed. A special day for us and for our family as we enter into that well-known institution called retirement. Retirement really has been quite a concept to get our minds around these last few years. For each time we thought about it, our plans seemed to change. Bill will share more about that later. You've also heard some about that already. While we have known this day would eventually come, we stopped giving much thought to it until just recently, when we needed to make decisions as to where we would have our retirement service and where we would settle down. The decision was not difficult. We chose to come home. Home to the territory, the division, the Corps, and to this Dearborn Heights Corps, which we left in 1969 as we began our adventure around the world, serving the Lord and His people. You who are here with us today, family, extended family, friends, people who we have worked with over the past years, and people whose paths we have crossed, humble us as we see you here today, celebrating with us. And to those known and unknown who have taken time from around the world to be with us through the live streaming, that humbles us as well. To think that you would take time and share this special day. We are especially honored to have the General and Commissioner Sylvia Cox with us. Already they have made their way into the hearts of our children and grandchildren, spending 2 hours with them in a kid-friendly dinner last evening and sharing in their fun and laughter. As you can see, they have survived Robert's plan. We are pleased as well to have Commissioners David and Barbara Jeffrey from National Headquarters, with whom we have served a few years ago, and also members of the Commissioners' Conference. We owe a debt of gratitude to Commissioner Seilers, territorial leaders of this Central Territory, for their willingness to support us in this event this afternoon. And we also express deep appreciation to Commissioners Harold and Betty Hinson, former leaders of this territory for whom our respect has only increased during the years of their retirement. And a special debt of gratitude to the Eastern Michigan Divisional leaders, Lieutenant Colonels John and Teresa Turner and their staff, especially to Colonel Teresa and Major Jan Sjogren, who have put hours of work and preparation in to make this day happen when we were many miles across the ocean. To each of you, we say a special thanks. They have been assisted by many divisional staff members and also members and friends of the Dearborn Heights Corps and the Royal Oak Corps throughout all the planning of this event. And last of all, thanks to our family for their contribution in making this day special. Special for us. And to our son-in-law, DJ Harula, for the graphic artwork that he has produced to make this a special time of remembrance. And now our story. Where do we start?
Well, let's start at the beginning. A very good place.
We're not going to sing.
It started in July 1970. We left the School for Officers Training after 1 year, possibly too soon, and headed for Kansas City, Kansas to lead the Armourdale Corps, which you've already heard something about. The Armourdale Corps Community Center, an appointment many miles away from any place we had ever been. We arrived on a hot summer July day, moved into our flat on the Corps building. Remember those days? And the stories we could tell about both the flat and the community are legion. Time does not allow us to speak much of our fledgling ministry there, perhaps only to say we did not know as much as we thought we did about leading a Salvation Army Corps in a real Salvation Army type community. This was but a foretaste of countless adventures to follow. We gained a puppy and a son there. Both of whom stayed with us for many years. The puppy is now in heaven, and and son builds at Royal Oak.
We could not have written a better story for our lives. We never thought or expected that this Army would take us out of the Central Territory or even out of the United States. Had we written the story, it would not have been nearly as exciting, interesting, or as fulfilling as the one that was planned by God, working through our leaders. We simply made ourselves available, without negotiation, without preconditions or qualifications, trusting our leaders to appoint us where we would do best, where we would serve best the mission. Our responsibility in the early part of our ministry included church work or core work, then administrative appointments, including lots of years of business and finance for Bill, and then my work with women, as well as in caring ministries. Our final 2 appointments in the Central Territory were as divisional leaders, and they readied us for what would happen next. We were hard at work in the Metropolitan Division of Chicago when the phone rang, and here's what happened.
It was August 2001. I was sitting at my desk, my divisional commander's desk, having recently returned from our furlough. At the other end of the line was the territorial commander, Commissioner Larry Moretz, inquiring if I was back from our vacation. I must have been. I was talking on the phone. Because, he said, the general would shortly be calling me. I said thank you, hung up, and then it dawned on me what he had said. I called him back to make sure I had heard correctly. I had heard correctly. And no sooner had he gotten off the phone when my secretary, who is here today in this gathering, came into the office and said, "There's a John Gowans on the phone, and he wants to talk to you." He greeted me with, "Hello, Bill, this is John Gowans. I have this idea, and I really like it." His great idea was that we would take up the leadership of the South American East Territory, relocate to Buenos Aires, and lead the Army's work in Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. We left the USA Central Territory and have not been back until now, save for the occasional visit. The beginning of an adventure lasting 14 years to this day.
Our family has always supported us in our work. Wherever it took us, they supported us. As many of you would know, we as Salvation Army officers move quite often, and thus the kids often moved quite often as well. As they grew older, you can imagine that the moves became more difficult as they left friends and the places they had grown to love for a new life in another area. But they always came along. They always pitched in, that is, until their college years, when one by one, they began to stay behind. We found ourselves in that last appointment in the Central Territory in Chicago, sitting across the dining room table, looking only at each other in a quiet house, much too quiet. There was no laughter, there was no one picking on the other, there were no more family squabbles at the dining table. There was only silence. There was no more taxi service needed. No more requests for money from the parents. That call that came from General Gowans brought us together as a family to make the announcement of our big move out of the country. Upon hearing the news, the children insisted we have family prayer together. There was not a dry eye in the room. And as you can see, they've continued to support us ever since that day. This last move back to London 2 years ago to international headquarters may have been the most difficult for them, yet they have endured and waited for this day faithfully and prayerfully.
Notwithstanding the fact that 3 generals in a row extended our active service. our retirement. They did their best to deny us this day. When we arrived at IASQ this last time, I mentioned that, and then added in the welcome meeting, we wanted to hurry up and leave IAHQ rather than take our chances with yet another gentleman. As an aside, I remember a divisional commander telling me when we were much younger that while officers did not know when many things might happen, one thing they knew for sure, even from the time of their commissioning, was when they would retire. That divisional commander could not have been more wrong.
We have had family and friends who have visited us around the world. Our children and spouses all made it to Argentina along with grandchildren. And they made it to England for Christmas together during our first appointment there. However, only Bram and his wife were able to visit us in Kenya because it was further away and difficult for the grandchildren to come. They visited us again in England during the last 2 years. The visits of friends and family always made our days more special. Niece Vicky visited us in rural Kenya, where she quickly fell in love with the people we were serving. And during her week there, she learned to slaughter the chicken that she was about to have for dinner. So not only have we seen some of this wonderful world, but our family has been able to take it in as well. God has been good.
An image which stands out in our minds, actually my mind because Nancy was not there, occurred in Buenos Aires on one of the national holidays when I attended a service at the Catedral Metropolitana, the Metropolitan Cathedral, to hear the Archbishop of the capital city deliver the homily. At the time, he was known as Archbishop Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Today we call him Pope Francis. With a president who was small in stature and First Lady of the nation in attendance, seated squarely in front of the preacher, the Archbishop used as his text that day the story of Zacchaeus, that wee little man. The thrust of the sermon was Zacchaeus only met Jesus when he came out of his lofty perch and mixed with the people. The application was obvious, even to this American expat struggling to understand Spanish. Perhaps there is a lesson for all of us in the Archbishop's message. So what have we learned during these 45 plus years of officership? You would hope we might have learned something. We hope we have learned something. Perhaps we have.
We remember a man named Moses Angatia, a teacher at our school for the visually impaired and the blind in Kibos, near Kisumu, Kenya. Moses himself was without sight and was now teaching those children who were like him. In a documentary we prepared in 2009 to mark the 1-year anniversary of the opening of the Kenya West Territory, Moses was interviewed and mentioned that his mother had had no idea that blind children could go to school, and then she found the Salvation Army. Moses remarks that if it had not been for the education he received, which then made it possible to him to go on to teacher training school so that he himself could teach, he had no idea where he would be today, possibly begging on the streets. And he concludes his words by posing the question, where would I be if it were not for the Salvation Army? We have learned that there still is a place for the Salvation Army in the world, in the 127 countries that we now serve in.
We have learned there is value and fulfillment found in serving. Leading by serving, in fact. In one of our appointments in this country, arguably our most favorite appointment, although it seems we had a number of most favorite appointments, the city where we were wanted to take the property which housed several programs: the Corps, Social Services Office, Housing for Women and Children. That housing program was comparatively small but filled a critical need in the city for women and children who had no other place to go. We looked at a number of places, none seemed right, and then we learned that the local order of Dominicans had a building on their campus which would fill the bill, fit the need perfectly, and they were willing to make it available to the Salvation Army, make it available to us, actually rent it to us, for the sum of $1 per year. Not a bad price. And further, they were willing to take care of all of the refitting modifications that were needed to make it fit for purpose. And again, our cost would still be that $1 per year. When the rehab work was completed and it was time to move in, the Dominicans suggested we have a united service of thanksgiving to thank God for this new relationship, but especially for the service which would be given to women and children in that place. During the service, opportunity was given for free and spontaneous prayers to be offered, something we do quite often in the Salvation Army. I'm not sure how much it is done in other churches. And so they were. So there they were, Salvationists and Dominicans praying together. I recall one elderly religious praying this way: Lord, help us to be worthy of those we serve. I didn't quite get it. Why be worthy of those we serve? Our reaction is often, I hope they appreciate what we're doing for them. I hope they appreciate how much this is putting me out. They should be thanking me. But as I reflected, I recalled the words of our Lord, who, when describing life in the new kingdom, tells us the king says to his followers, whatever you did for one of the least of my family, you did it for me. We want to be worthy of those we serve, as this Dominican sister prayed, because we want to be worthy of the Lord. We have learned that there is still a place for a serving army, because we want to be worthy of the Lord, in whose name we serve.
We have learned there is such a thing as grace. William Booth said, the purpose of the cross is to make us good. Jesus died to make us good. He died to change us, and he died to transform us. He died to take away our sins. Because of his grace, the bad are made good. Bad people are made good. Those of poor reputation become honorable. Those who are outcast find a place in the family of God. Those who are with hope and in despair become hopeful. Those whose lives are dirty become clean. Those whose living is controlled by evil, degrading, filthy habits find freedom. Those who once served Satan and his kingdom of darkness become empowered by God to be his servants.
Grace can transform attitudes. Grace can change our thinking. Grace can help us live and work with those who would otherwise be impossible to live and work with. Tolerate those who are intolerable. Grace is able to change weakness into strength. Lives are changed. People make restitution for wrongdoing. Marriages are rescued and families are restored because of grace. We have seen it happen around the world. We have seen it happen here. We have experienced it ourselves, and so have you. It can happen to all who place their faith in God through Christ. Because of what he has done, we too may live a new life. Those are some of the things we have learned. Early in our officership, my dad said to me, just try to earn your pay. Apparently there were some who did not. Nancy and I will trust God and our leaders that we are not among them. Indeed, after 45 years of Salvation Army officership, his grace still amazes us. And we